Are you guarding? Okay, good afternoon. Please take a seat and get ready to rock. I'm very excited. I want to welcome you to our 100th session of the Positive Links Speaker Series. I think that we deserve a round of applause for that. I'm Jane Dutton, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Center for Positive Organizations. And as a center, we describe ourselves lots of different ways, but one of my favorite ways is that we're a community of students, of practitioners, and faculty who are trying to push the frontier to understand what cultivates flourishing in individuals and flourishing in organizations. And we're part of a much bigger effort that is at the Ross School of Business on positive business. There are several institutes at the center, faculty distributed all over the Ross School who are doing really cutting edge work in this area, and I'll tell you, as a faculty member, it's a privilege to be part of this big effort. We are celebrating a really significant milestone today, and I want to just give you some fun facts about about the Positive Link Speakers Series. One is that Kim Cameron and I, Kim, do you remember? We're the first speakers, and it was November 25th, 2002. Whew, way back there. And we talked about what is positive organizational scholarship, and we're still wrestling with trying to answer that question. The series has actually been in existence as a result for 13 years, and we've basically, during the academic year, met once a month. So for those of you who are coming to your first one, you have many more to look forward to, because you can come to these speaker series once a month during the academic year. We've had over 90 different presenters, and I think there are a bunch of presenters from past Positive Link series in the audience. Could you raise your hand if you are a past Positive Link Spirit? Come on, raise them high. Okay, well, there's supposed to be 12 people that enrolled that have been past Positive Link Spirits, but we are inhabited by some of the greats, so thank you for coming. We've had 10 people who have, of the people that have presented in the past, that have presented more than once. And the interesting thing is the largest audience that we've had for Positive Links was 220 people, and it was at Bob Quinn's session on January 31st, 2011. I want to this is an opportunity, since we're celebrating our 100th session, to bestow some celebrations and honoring of some people that have played a key role in the development of this series. And the first person we'd like to recognize is Janet Max, who played a pivotal role in sort of the birthing of the center, and for 10 years, for over a decade, she coordinated the Positive Links series and sort of brought it from nothing to what it is today. So Janet, we'd like you to come on stage, and we're going to present you with a little memento to express our appreciation to you. And we're going to, there you are. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think there's supposed to be a picture. Okay, here we go. Thank you. The next wonderful people that we would like to recognize are Diane and Paul Jones. We've been so grateful. They have been sponsoring and supporting this series almost since it began, and have played a pivotal role coming every time to meet with the speakers, but they, even when they're not here, they provide a lot of support for us continuing with this series. So Paul and Diane, please come up, and you can get your positive spiral as a memento and a thanks. This is for you. Thank you, lovely lady. Thank you. Thank you to both, and I guess we'll do a picture. Great, thank you. Now it is my honor and privilege to introduce my wonderful colleague, Bob Quinn. So for those of you who know me, know that I love the metaphor of gardens. And I consider myself fortunate, as do many others, I think, at Ross, to feel like they're in the same soil as Bob Quinn. And I feel as part of the soil tended by Bob, I feel like I've grown very much as a faculty member, but probably even more importantly as a person. In the garden, or the Ross School of Business, Bob is a master gardener. I've had the honor of being his colleague, his collaborator, his follower, both when Bob was area chair and as director of the center, and his students, is an experience of lifelong learning from Bob. Now, master gardeners, they know how to churn up the soil just right? They provide sun, water, and occasional weed killer. I've seen Bob do all that with a word, a question, a laugh, or a story. Bob changes people's worlds. How many of you in this room feel you've been changed by Bob in some way? Okay, look around, Bob. A living testimony to his master gardener status. Now, a few facts that you should know about this master gardener. One, he's written 16 books. Probably many of you have read his books. One of his books, Deep Change, has sold at this point over 100,000 copies. That's pretty amazing. He is the co-developer of the Competing Values Framework, which, as I mentioned when I introduced Kim last month, is been a major framework for developing and improving organizational cultures all over the world. His book with Gretchen Spreitzer, who's here, and other people, called The Best Teacher in You, won the Ben Franklin Award, designating it as the best book in education for 2015. He has 35 years of experience consulting with major corporations and government agencies. He unlocks greatness in other people. He also has 6 children. One I know who is here, 15 grandchildren, and a wonderful life partner, Delsa. And as his website says, he is a friend to all. So prepare yourself for a treat. I'd like to welcome Bob. He's going to talk to us about change the music to change the dance, how to turn organizations positive.
Thank you, Jane. When I was getting organized and I put this slide together in particular, it was a very moving experience to put this slide together and think about this being the 100th session. And where that took me back to was Kim and Jane in very early conversations, and then Gretchen and others that have come on. When people can embrace each other in doing new things and hold each other together, amazing things can happen. It is stunning to me that we could be as far along as we are at the center. And I thank all of you who've participated in one way or another for that experience. On this slide is a gift. I want to give you a gift. And it actually started with Angie. Where's Angie? She's got to be here somewhere. Up there hiding. Last night, and I thought I was done preparing, and she walked up and she said, well, you know, we've asked each person who's coming if they have a question they'd like to ask. And so we've got 11 people who have asked questions. And she handed them to me, and I thought, well, I'm not going to change this now. And then I made the mistake of reading the questions. 8 of the 11 people asked the same question. Can you just imagine for a second, what might that be? Because that's 8 of 11. That's astounding. Well, here's the question. I've rewritten it because I had to integrate 8 different people. But this is basically what it said. How do I introduce positive organizing to executives at higher levels who are oblivious, they embrace command and control, they never communicate a vision, they have no consistent values, they only have a technical view of life, they're in the public health care or education or operations or finance or the list goes on. I found this very passionate, that we have many people who are hungry to have enriched experiences at work and who feel absolutely blocked as they look up the hierarchy at people who cannot lead. Holding a position in a hierarchy does not mean you're a leader. I would suggest there are CEOs who are not leaders. Holding a position does not make you a leader. Now, the gift that I would like to give is an answer to this. And the gift is a positive passage. That is, a few months ago, because of some experiences with so many people, Kim and I teach a class that's very intense, a week-long class. Executives come in, and they sit on the edge of their seats for 5 days, soaking up the positive concepts. And then we say to them on the last day, what are you going to go home and do differently? And they get a panicked look on their face. And it took me a couple of years to figure out what that panic look meant. To go home and do a positive practice is countercultural and therefore dangerous. And executives, like high school boys and girls, are afraid of not being cool, right? Of being rejected. We're all still in high school. So I started writing a blog a few months ago, and every day there's a positive passage. And what that means is I tell some story that's the equivalent of a parable. Because getting into the positive lens requires moving out of a conventional thought process into a new view. Parables are designed to help you change your meaning system. And the thought is that these go out every day. If you read one and like one, the last question each day is, how could I use this passage to create a more positive organization? How could this be distributed to my people or my boss? Or I wrote one in regards to this question just for you tonight. Angie's going to have them, she's like an angel. She disappears from place to place. So she's going to have those at the end. We're going to give them out at the end because I believe if you read this passage right now, the majority of you would read it, crumple it, and say, what a waste that is. I hope that at the end of this session, when you get it, that the majority of you will read it and say, I get that. Because it's a very radical statement. So with that, here's the outline. Playing off the new book, I want to first tell you a story and have it serve as a metaphor tonight. Then I want to spend just a minute or two on what is the positive lens for those of you who are new to this. And I'll just spend a minute or two on that. Positive organization, and then 2 major themes from the book. 1, becoming bilingual. And 2, turning the organization positive. So that's the rough sketch of where I see us going for the next few minutes. So the story. The story I heard a few months ago, and it goes like this. There was a doctor on a reservation for Native Americans, and an old man came in to the clinic and stood there. The doctor said, "How can I help you?" And the man didn't talk. So finally the doctor said, "If you don't tell me what's wrong, I can't help you." And the old man looked at the doctor and said, "Do you dance?" And the doctor was a little unsettled at first, and then it dawned on him, this is one of the medicine men who heals through music and dancing. And as he thought about that, he turned to the man and said, "Can you teach me to dance?" And the old man said, "I can teach you to dance, but you have to hear the music." I believe that in organizations, in research on organizations, in everything about organizations, we spend all our time focusing on the dance. Because like the tree, that's what we can see. The music is like the root system, and we don't think about it a lot. Today, I'd like to focus on those notions of the music and the dance. And I hope in a few minutes that it's really crystal clear what that means and how you can use it to make a difference in the world. So, the positive lens. The basic argument around positive organization scholarship is, when we wrote the first book, was, look, social scientists go out into the world and ask the question, what is? They get a random sample, they identify a pattern, and they say, okay, this is what life is like. And it doesn't matter which social science you're in, it's pretty much what we do. We describe things. We said in the book, it may be time to change the bias. And that is, we may need to move the lens from the middle of the curve to the far right side and ask the question, what is life like at its best? What is an individual like at her best? What is a group like at their best? An organization or a topic like decision-making or leadership? What are they like at their best? That changes everything. We wrote that book, and we took some heat for writing that book. But now, many years, 13 years later, there are several hundred scholars around the world who take this as their identity. And there's a flow of studies coming constantly. And they're exhilarating. And they're different from normal social science because in the last paragraph of every journal article, there's a paragraph that says, implication for practice. And our friend Jean Bartunek did analysis of those and said, they're pretty much a waste of time. It's very hard to translate. On the contrary, when people do POS studies, because they're looking at very unusual positive things, it's inherently suggestive of things you can do better. It very much lends itself to practice. So we've introduced a bias. That upsets some people. They say, well, science is not supposed to be biased. Therefore, this is bad. I would suggest science, normal science, is highly biased. Towards what? Towards equilibrium. Towards what's normal. And towards constraint rather than possibility. And what you find in studies in positive psychology and positive organization scholarship is the discovery of the reality of possibility. If you study somebody at their best, or some group at their best, and they're doing these things that are excellent, those things exist. They're real. For the rest of the world, they're possibility. But now the possibility is grounded in reality. And that's, to me, very, very exciting. So, please take a look. I'm going to get a little participation here. Look carefully at this list. And what do you see? How would you describe this list? Let me get a few hands. What do you see up there? A narrow framework of operation. What else? Somebody else. Yes. Negativity. I see negativity. All right, good. Anybody else? Small. I see. It looks small to me. These are the central assumptions of social science. If you're an economist, people are self-interested. Resources are scarce. Conflict is natural. And the list could go on. Now, here's the interesting thing. You and I started to learn this list as soon as we could talk. When we were on the playground and someone said, let's play Army, you said, I'll be the private. Is that what you said? No, you said, I'll be the general. You were 3 years old and you knew it was better to be on top of a hierarchy than on the bottom of a hierarchy, right? You went to elementary school. And in those recess things, as you found out you were different in some way, you learned more about this. And then junior high school, and then high school. Then you went to college. In every class that you took in college, the professor, without ever saying a word, implicitly was assuming these very things. Then you went to work. And you lived in an organization where you learned these things again. These are deeply held. Now here's the question. If I assume these things explicitly or implicitly, and I'm a manager, what am I going to do? I'm going to enact those assumptions. And if I enact those assumptions, what happens? The people around me behave exactly according to these assumptions. It's a self-reinforcing cycle that never stops. So the social scientists are accurately describing what is. What is this. This is reality. And that reality is self-reinforcing. What is this? It's abnormal. That's a great answer. This is abnormal. This is also, yes, sir. Interesting. Abnormal and difficult. Put those together, you've got a great answer. Because you're suggesting that this is a form of work. I would suggest to you that organizations are very vulnerable and fragile. And they go to this list rapidly as they break down. And everyone becomes self-interested. We get what we call silo behavior. Right? I hear unending statements about silo behavior. Over here, we get something else. This is also real. When you put on the positive lens and study an organization, this is what you find. It's not make-believe, it's real. It happens far less frequently than this. But it's the reality of possibility. And it suggests a kind of work, and the name of that work is called leadership. What leaders do is they take this surface conflict and transform it into collaboration. And people perform, they flourish, and they exceed expectations. They grow and they produce. Two different dances. When I was a kid and I went to those teenage dances, some of them went flat. Do you remember that, when they weren't so good? And then the kids would all get around and complain, and the DJ would change the music, and everybody would run out the floor and start dancing. This is a different dance. For that to happen, we need different music. The music has to change. Now, this is from a paper that was published this year. in which some people reviewed the literature on culture in organizations, and they produced something they called the Organizational Effectiveness Value Chain. It's a very interesting concept. They said the chain looks like this. It begins with leader values, and then it goes to leader behavior. Then it goes to organization culture, then to organization climate, and then to employee engagement, and from there to employee performance. Now that's a very interesting chain. Where is the dance? It's right there. Where are our eyes and our efforts? Well, let's do the performance evaluation system because, this person's really screwed up. Let's get that performance evaluation done and we'll change their behavior. That's the aspirational assumption. The question is, how often does their behavior change? We constantly focus on the behavior. We try to operate on it, use our authority and expertise to tell them what to do, and they behave just like you do when someone tells you what to do. Right? Where is the music? That first entry, leader values, I don't think means a list of values or a specific set of values. I think it means leader values. That is, when you or I close our hypocrisy gaps, and we all have them because we all have values up here and behavior that looks like this. So we have gaps. We're all hypocrites. But whenever we close one of those, we feel immensely good about ourselves. And when we feel good about ourselves, we look at someone else and a magical thing happens. I see the potential in her that she doesn't see in herself. And I can help her become more than she is. When a leader behaves with integrity, other virtues follow. And then collective virtues emerge. The music's down here, the dance is up there. That is not what the Western world believes. Hearing the music. In the book, I talk about people learning to hear the music. The first two examples are they blow me away even now. The first is from the CEO of DT&E Energy, Jerry Anderson. Jerry Anderson was trained in the hard sciences. Then he was trained in finance. Then he went to McKinsey. Then he went to DT&E. And he was a hard-nosed problem solver. And then he became president. And then the 2008 recession hit. And the epicenter was Detroit, Michigan. And within a week or two, they were in deep financial trouble. And he had to solve a problem that could not be solved. And his frameworks did not work. And through a very long story, he discovered purpose. The people wanted to do meaningful things and went out of their way to do them and save the company. And it transformed his thinking. And a long story follows of how he built on that. Alberto Weiser, fourth largest global food company. 11 years of spectacular performance, but the first year was a disaster. He almost got fired. Started in finance. Was brilliant at finance. It shot him up the hierarchy until it made him CEO. He didn't believe in purpose. He didn't believe in people or culture. And he almost got fired. And then, also through a series of accidents, basically, he discovered another paradigm. He discovered purpose. He discovered people. And everything changed. And he made an incredible summary sentence in an interview we did with him. He said, when I summarize everything that happened and what the basic problem was, it all comes down to one word. expert. When I stopped believing that I had to be the expert, everything started to work. This cathedral is built for expertise. We worship expertise. The poor MBA students who come in here from the first day have to be on stage as experts. Here's how smart I am. And be terrified every minute that they might be exposed. They don't know something. Professors are the same. It's a very demanding God, expertise. This week, a colleague is in the Oregon side. We're in a company that was in big trouble. Finance guy said, it was shocking to think that shifting the culture could solve our financial problems. And he said that with enormous passion. Financial officer who discovered a $40 million deficit in an organization. Startling, shocking, upsetting. And then said, I wanted badly to help. And my financial tools helped stem the bleeding in a few places, but I couldn't do anything to fix the problem. But then a new leader came in, and she insisted on transparency, and then on purpose, and then on some similar things. And all of a sudden, the leadership team transformed. And the people leading other functions transformed. He said they began to roll up their budgets. Now, what he meant by that is, you see the normal practice? Spend every bit of your money at the last part of that year. Right? Sounds familiar? Big groan over there. All of a sudden, they were handing their money back because they fully trusted that they'd have what they needed next year if it was a worthy project. He said we had a financial miracle. In a very short time, the $40 million was made up. It was unbelievable. It was shocking to me, the finance guy. He said there are 19 other people in my position in other parts of the larger organization. When I say it's all about culture, they laugh at me. They can only see through the financial lens. You see what all four of them are saying? When I get past my initial training, my one-dimensional view of the world, I become bilingual. In fact, the first two, the CEO said, I can't talk to my engineers like this, like I'm talking to you. I have to talk their language and then slowly bring them along. But I used to be one language guy. Now I'm bilingual. I think that's a very important process. F. Scott Fitzgerald said it this way. The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. The human mind does not want to do that. It's an either-or logic that you and I live by from minute to minute, and we want clean categories that are separate, and we want to do analysis that's clean. And yet all the literature on creativity says we have breakthroughs when we have interpenetration of boundaries, unlike concepts brought together in synergies. Most of us, if I said draw a picture of an organization, we would do some version of that picture. How many of us would draw this picture? That's a picture of a social network. Not an authority system, a social network. An organization's a living system. People who live only by the first image do not see reality. The conversion I'm talking about is the ability to see both those pictures at the same time and have them work together. So, in the book, after exploring the bilingual mind, I suggest that positive organizations turn positive because of these 5 things. The establishment of purpose, the creation of authentic conversations. This week, in that experience with this very challenged organization, the miracle that we did is we created authentic conversation. And magic happened. in that place. Seeing possibility, embracing the common good, and trusting the emergent process. Some of those things don't make any sense to you, I know. Let's try and ground it here in a minute. But let me make one point about purpose. I spent 2006 to 2009 away from here. I ran an organization in Australia. When I came back, my good friend, Anjan Thacker, a world-class economist, sat me down and for 2 hours he grilled me. And when he was done, he said, what you did violates the conventional assumptions of economics. And what I did was build a positive organization. He said, we have to write a paper. He then patiently explained to me the heart of economics. And he said, it looks like this. Microeconomics is about the principal-agent problem. The principal hires an agent, an employee, says, I'm going to give you this much money. You do this work. As long as the principal is there to watch the agent, watch the employee, everything's fine. The moment he turns his back, performance goes down. That's the principal-agent problem. In our paper, we built a mathematical model of an organization, and then we introduced one new variable, higher purpose. The moment we did, the entire model transformed. The agents became principals. They became owners. They were intrinsically motivated. When people embrace a higher purpose, their motivation becomes intrinsic. It becomes a calling, not a job. It's a fundamental shift. Anjan was so excited about this. He said, we have to go interview CEOs who have high-purpose organizations. I said, fine. We went and interviewed 25 CEOs. For me, the big shock was that about half of them were like the people I just described. They didn't believe in purpose when they first started, or people, or culture. They all went through this transformation that I put up a few minutes ago. That was stunning to me. They got there by accident. Now, what that means, I think, is that this notion of purpose and these related notions are crucial. What I'd like to do is to bring them to life. I'm going to share with you a living case. As I share this case with you, I'd like you to keep looking at those 5 things. Creating a purpose, nurturing authentic conversation, seeing possibility, embracing the common good, trusting the emergent process. Trusting the emergent process means I give them a purpose that's meaningful to them. They then get charged with challenges, and they organize themselves. You support it, you facilitate it, but they do it. That is very hard for many people who've grown up in the transactional model. And yet that's at the heart of the magic. So let me give you this living case. You check out these 5 things, okay? Living case. Kim Cameron. There's a living case. Kim Cameron gets a phone call. In fact, he put up a slide, if you were here last month, describing this particular system. This is a school system which I will not name. They are bankrupt. They're on their 4th emergency manager. In some subjects, the students are at 4th percentile in the state. Last month, on the first day of school, when I was with some of them, they had no teachers for their classes and no idea where they would come from. They live with experiences on a daily basis that would shock many of us here. This is a grim and gruesome place. And they called up Kim Cameron and said, hey, could you help us? Could you help us become a positive organization? Kim Cameron says, oh, of course I could. He sends out an email to all his colleagues in the center. He says, we're going to go to the school district and help them. You know, who's ready? Everybody was busy. I knew I was in deep trouble because I knew someone had to carry his body back home. And there was only going to be one person willing to do that. So I knew where I was going to end up going. So we went to this city. We went to a high school where 90 principals were assembled, and the emergency manager. The emergency manager gave a 10-minute talk. It was his first interaction with them. I thought it was very impressive. When he was done, the principals went like this. Kim leaned over and said, "These people don't believe." I said, "Kim, no kidding," right? So I introduced Kim, and Kim began to teach positive organization scholarship, which I've seen him do many times, except this day he was magnificent. He's always good. He was magnificent. It was flowing. And then I noticed something amazing. Remember the applause. I looked around, and these very hard-nosed people who know reality from a hype, you don't con these people. They were sitting on the edge of their seats. They were drinking in Kim Cameron. Then he asked them a question. They began to talk. I was standing on a stairway just above them, and my eyes started to water. I call those truth tears. They're the kind of tears I have when I have an intense spiritual experience. And that's what happened at that moment, because it became crystal clear to me that these abused people were people of purpose. And they knew what was authentic and what wasn't, and that's all we needed to succeed. And suddenly, I wanted to be there. Kim finished, I stood up, and I said, "I'm sorry, but I've come naked. I have no PowerPoint slides. I have no prepared presentation. It's just you and me." And they looked a little shocked and unsettled by that. I said, "All I have for you are 4 questions. Would you mind discussing these 4 questions for a minute, and then we'll talk about them?" They did. Then we talked about them. And amazing things started to happen. I thought, wow, this is really succeeding. When a woman raised her hand, her picture's right up there on the left side, on the right side. She said, "Yeah, I saw your slide with those heartbeats and how good it is when things are positive. I'm going to tell you what working in this city, in this school, this is really like." And people start saying, "Go, sister, go, sister." And for the next 5 minutes, he painted a very dark picture. When she was done, I turned back to her and said, "Why?" She was kind of shocked. She said, "Why what?" I said, "Why do you do it?" "Oh, because I signed up for it." I said, "No, that's wrong." Whoa, the tension in the room went through the roof. And then the guy over here said, "The kids. You do it because of the kids." And every head started to nod. We wrapped up. The administrator who brought us in shock, said, "That was so much better than I expected." We could spend an hour on that sentence. What did he expect? He expected transactional conversation and maybe an incremental improvement. We're walking down the stairs, and I end up next to this woman, and she's still upset. And she's going on about being abused and being a scapegoat. And I uttered one sentence, which I don't even remember, when she froze. And she had an epiphany in real time. And she looked at me, and her body changed. She said, "That's it." I said, "What?" "Maybe I'm supposed to be a scapegoat." She said, "That's okay. If it will transform the system, and these kids get educated, it's okay for me to be a scapegoat." And then she threw her arms around me. And then she left. I never got her name. About a week later, we were on this campus with their 90 senior-most people. Again, Kim spent a day taking them through those basic concepts, which again they drunk in. The next day, we had a conversation again. In the middle of that conversation, one of them raised their hand and said, I feel like an abused wife, and my abusive husband's the school district. Whoa, every hand shot up. A second woman said, that's right. I know a lot of abused mothers and wives. The reason they stay is so the kids don't get beat up more. That's why I stay at the school, to protect the kids. Hand shot up. And then this woman said, and that raises a very important question. Can people who've been abused for 10 years be part of a transformation? Can the people in this room be part of this transformation? Boy, people grew very serious about that question. Instead of cutting those questions off, we encouraged more of them. And then I said, let's answer them. Let's you answer them. And we began to talk. And at one point, it all focused on the authority figure, the new emergency manager. And the question was, why would we trust him? The other three didn't work out. And that got to be a very heated exploration when one woman raised her hand and said, we have to trust him. We have no choice. Everybody looked at her. What are you talking about? She said, we cannot bear to lose another generation of kids. We have to trust him. During the break, one of these women walked up to me and said, thank you. I said, for what? She said, for doing what's impossible. I said, what? She said, this has been a collective exercise in forgiveness. I had never thought about it like that, but it sure made sense when she said it. We went back in, and the emergency manager stood up. He said, I have learned things in this room that are impossible to ever learn. And I have a proposal. I propose that the 90 of you serve as my transformation team. Everything we do will go through you. You will screen it, you will improve it, you will carry it. How many of you are willing to do that? 90 hands went up. Something that would have been impossible 24 hours before. This picture is a very sacred picture to me. They asked, can we take a picture? Notice the smiles. In the middle, you can barely see him, is the emergency manager. What did we do? We searched for purpose. We discovered purpose, we articulated purpose, and we continually re-clarified purpose. We held authentic conversations where everybody could tell the truth, something that never happens in our hierarchies. We were able then to see what? Possibility. People began to embrace the common good. 90 hands. An emergent process was unfolding in those 2 days. Are the test scores higher today? Absolutely not. Nor will they be for several years, if they do everything right between now and then. This doesn't fix the system. It starts the process to make it possible to fix the system. The first 3 emergency managers never brought these people together in a room, ever. Why? They had financial problems to solve. That has nothing to do with culture or people or purpose. And they failed. The day before school started, we again found ourselves with 320 or 40 with enormous problems as we tried to work with them. And during the break, a woman came up. She said, "You've been talking about me. I've heard about it." I looked at her. She said, "I'm the lady that yelled at you in that first meeting." I said, "Oh, yeah, you are the lady that yelled at me." And then she said, "I want you to know that in the last 12 months, 3 of the people in my family that I'm closest to died. And I didn't know if I had the ability to go on doing this anymore. But I want you to know what happened after I told you I was willing to be the scapegoat." She said, "I went back to my school, and I brought my staff together. And I said, we're going to be a positive school. And it's going to start with a hug. Every morning, every day of the year, every child gets a hug when they come to that door. And when the bad stuff's happening, as it will, it stops with us. It never goes to those kids." She said, everybody bought in. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. When we ask the question, how do I get it up the hierarchy? I have to help them overcome the same fear that I live in. And the only way to do that is for me to change me. When I have the courage to do things I'm afraid to do to them, I may model for them the courage that they need to do things differently. That fear thing is enormous. One of the last pieces in the book is a simple tool. Again, at the end of those weeks, these highly educated executives would just look at us because they were afraid to go back and do something positive. That was my problem, not theirs. My job is to change them. So we invented something, Positive Organization Unit. All it is a list of 100 practices from 100 real organizations. Some of them very weird practices. But what we ask them to do is to read the list, rate them, take out the 5 or 6 most interesting out of 100, and then reinvent them to their stewardship. The reinvention process is crucial. Because unless they reinvent them and are excited about them, they're not going to do them because they're afraid. But when they reinvent them and create their own thing that they're excited about, then they start doing things. We had a man come back. We have one company that comes back to us after the first week who recently said to me, "I spent a lot of time thinking about that course and how to boil it all down into one simple thing that would change everything." I said, "That sounds interesting." He said, "I walked into my office and on the whiteboard I wrote, 'What result do you want to create?' Every time one of my direct reports would come in and start talking to me, I'd point at the board. I wouldn't talk to them. They got very discombobulated. Then they started coming in with an answer to that question. And then I'd talk to them. He said, "I can't tell you how dramatically we have shifted and become a purpose-driven organization." Now, could any idea be simpler than that? The question is, would you go do it? For most of us, the answer is no. It's uncomfortable. It's outside the culture. We have to invent things we believe in. But eventually, we have to go outside the norms in a positive direction. We have to become positive deviants. So, I want to end again with that present, that positive passage. I hope you all pick it up and read it and decide whether to crumple it. I hope that you sign on the block. And look at those each day. And when you find one that means something to you, share it with the people you care about. You could use it to start a meeting. Let's talk about this. You could use it to simply send around. You can do any number of things with it, but it's a parable to get you started as painlessly as possible in new conversations outside the conventional paradigm. I hope that that starts you on a journey where you can embrace and practice some of these things and make other people's lives better. With that hope, I thank you very, very much for your attention.
So, as is tradition, we're going to give Bob an artifact. But I hope you feel like I do, that beaming out from this man is so much light and wisdom. And what a privilege it is to have you do this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Also, we have food outside that we'd love to have you partake in. And I don't know if Angie is still here. Is Angie the angel up there? But I just also want to take this opportunity to thank Angie and all of the people that are working with Angie to make this series go so well. So please, another hand for Angie, and then the food. Thank you, and I hope you'll join us next month. We have Jody Hoffer-Gattel, who, if you're in healthcare, you know about Jody Hoffer-Gattel. She's doing literally the most exciting work, in my opinion, globally on relational coordination and as a form of positive organizing and what that's doing for teams and for organizations. So please join us as the great series continues.